Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a deeply fascinating source that follows a boy named Thomas. It introduces this brutally simple rule he used to completely shatter the whole illusion of overnight success. Look, if you've ever felt like the rest of the world is just sprinting forward while you're stuck standing completely still, well, this is exactly what you need to hear. Let's get into it. Right out of the gate, the source text hits us with a really uncomfortable question. Why are you still stuck? I mean, it's a heavy thing to think about, right? If you are putting in the hours, you're working hard, but absolutely nothing is changing, and you're frankly just exhausted from trying, this explainer isn't here to give you some fluffy motivation. It is literally here to wake you up. But to understand the solution, Thomas, the text paints this incredibly vivid picture of where he started. A tiny house, cracked walls letting the wind right in, lights that frankly had a mind of their own. And Thomas, he wasn't lazy. He definitely wasn't stupid. He was just trapped in this forgotten little village where merely surviving took up most of the day. His future, well, it was already mapped out by people who never even bothered to ask him what he actually wanted. He was constantly told to just be realistic. But as the source brilliantly points out,
Which brings us to Section 1, the trap of being ignored.
now being poor is incredibly hard, obviously. But the psychological trap of his environment, that was way more damaging than an empty wallet. The source highlights this super fascinating dynamic. People didn't insult him because, insulting him would mean he actually mattered enough to them to warrant a reaction. Instead, they just ignored him. And that plants this incredibly toxic seed of doubt. It whispers that maybe, just maybe, he was never really meant for anything more. That is a seriously dangerous mindset to try and break out of. And you can see this brutal contrast playing out every single day. On one hand, you have his peers, friends just laughing freely because, let's face it, life is fundamentally lighter when basic survival isn't your main concern. But on the other side, Thomas is completely trapped. He has to sit there watching everyone else move forward, grabbing these opportunities that rarely ever knock twice on a poor door, while he just stays stuck exactly where life dropped him. It's totally paralyzing. Moving on to Section 2, no one is coming. So this brings us to this really pivotal moment in the source text. Picture this. It's pitch black, he's sitting all alone, his phone screen is dying. And in that total darkness, Thomas faces a terrifying but honestly liberating truth. No mentor is coming to rescue him. There is absolutely no miracle coming to magically fix his life. There is zero shortcuts. It is just him and the clock is ticking. Talk about a moment of absolute accountability, right? This sets up Section 3, the 1-hour rule. Faced with that crushing reality, you would totally expect him to make some massive, dramatic declaration, like cue the Rocky training montage, right? Or maybe post a massive thread online about his new hustle. But he didn't do any of that. He made a much, much smaller choice. Just 1 hour a day. That's literally it. It wasn't fueled by some crazy high motivation, no grand announcements, just one quiet, ugly hour of daily work. Some days his brain was totally fried, some days he failed miserably and just wanted to throw in the towel, but he stayed fiercely committed to that single hour. And here's the kicker. He never talked about it. Even when he barely dragged himself to do that hour, he kept his mouth totally shut. Because as the source so powerfully notes, talk is just comfort. Silence, that is where the actual growth happens. Announcing your big goals just gives you this fake sense of achievement. Thomas figured out really early on that if he wanted out, he had to build in the dark. Let's look at Section 4. Discipline isolates before elevating. Okay, this right here is arguably the hardest part of the entire journey, the agonizing wait for anything to happen. Because when you start a habit like this, the world does not instantly hand you a trophy. After 1 month, Thomas is wearing the exact same clothes, dealing with the exact same struggles. To the outside world, his efforts were completely invisible. Hit month 3, friends started drifting away because he was constantly busy. But by month 6, even though the outside still looked totally unchanged, his internal wiring had completely rewired. The excuses were dead, his focus was razor sharp, and his patience, well, it became downright dangerous. The harsh reality of self-improvement is that people are going to notice a distance long before they ever notice your success. His family didn't get it. Deep loneliness just became his new normal. True discipline practically demands that you separate yourself from the crowd long before you ever rise above it. You really start to see this massive divide in behavior. On one side, you have the standard approach. People just chasing the weekends, always waiting for that perfect spark of motivation to finally feel ready. But Thomas's new reality, he was chasing mastery. He was putting in the work even when he felt absolutely nothing.
zero motivation. He used that one ugly hour to basically build a brick wall between his old life and his future. Which brings us to section 5, the quiet compound effect.
Eventually, all that silent, isolated effort has to actually manifest in the real world, right? But here's the thing. A whole year later, there still wasn't some massive viral moment. No crazy overnight success. There was only the undeniable heavy weight of compounded results. Year by year, his skills sharpened. Real, earned confidence started replacing his fear. And eventually, those opportunities that used to walk right past his door, they finally started to notice him.
And then came the big shift. The exact same people in that village who spent years ignoring him suddenly demanded to know his secret. What happened to you? How did you change so much? They desperately wanted the shortcut. They were looking for the magic pill. And when he smiled and gave them his incredibly boring answer, literally just 1 hour a day, they were totally shocked. It just sounded way too simple to be true.
Now, you might think he'd be super arrogant at this point, right? Puffing out his chest, bragging to everyone. But the source tells us he was actually angry. He was angry at how ridiculously simple the solution really was, angry at how long he'd waited to actually start, and mostly angry at how many years people waste endlessly chasing motivation instead of simply leaning on boring, quiet discipline. That realization completely exposed the massive flaw in everyone else's mindset. Finally, we arrive at section 6, start your 1 hour. The source doesn't just leave us with a feel-good story, though. It distills Thomas's exact method into 3 super actionable steps that anyone watching this explainer can actually apply right now. Step 1, learn while the village sleeps. Step 2, practice while everyone else is busy complaining about their circumstances. And step 3, invest your minutes purposefully while your friends waste their years. By sticking to this, that single hour eventually spilled over into the rest of his day. It transformed his character, making him incredibly grounded, laser-focused, and totally unreachable by outside negativity. Today, Thomas doesn't need to shout to be heard. His quiet discipline over all those hours built such a massive gap between him and his peers that honestly, they will simply never catch up. He isn't loud, but because of the sheer substance he built entirely in the dark, he is now completely impossible to ignore in the light.
Which brings us to our final challenge for you. Are you done waiting for some magical wave of inspiration to finally hit you? Or are you going to let another hour, another day, another whole year just pass you by? Really think about what you could do with your one quiet, ugly hour, starting today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.